All right, here we go. It's your boy, Bostonian plays video games. Fallout 76 as you per usual. We're just kind of walking around the wasteland. Love the map. Got to do it. Today I wanted to talk about something that I talked about yesterday, but it didn't record. So I'm doing it again, and hopefully it actually goes well this time, or it's actually recording. So. It was because I was using a headset attached to my controller, and I figured I'd experiment with it. Well, experiment with was a failure. So I want to talk about the 2016 presidential election because I think enough time has passed where hopefully we can start putting some things into perspective. As Look, as with anybody, I think, when I first saw Donald Trump running, I mean, number one, he looked like he was way behind, had no prior experience with, an office, certainly not the highest office in the land. And, I thought it was a joke, to be honest with you, and I think that's what a lot of people thought. I traveled the country twice during the entire election. I was going out to California. When I first began the trip out there, Bernie Sanders was just trying to get California, see if he could win California. So he was very much still in the race. Look at this guy, huh? Booyah. He was very much still in the race. And, a lot of people were, again, I always say, when I was traveling the country, I saw two bumper stickers. One was for Bernie Sanders and one was for Donald Trump. Now, on my way back, what had happened to Bernie happened. And I only saw Trump signs. I didn't see many Hillary signs. So it was kind of a confusing message when the media was kind of pumping up Hillary as much as they were, kind of almost like a shoo-in, against Donald Trump, which, I think everybody kind of felt the same way. It's like, how do you lose to this guy? And that's why I think it was such a traumatic experience when Trump did win for half of the country, because we thought we were gonna take the cake. So the problem with all of this is, number one, she wasn't very charismatic. I always look to. I've been following presidential elections since I was, in high school, and maybe even before that. I've always found them to be educational or, somewhat entertaining as far as, politics go. And, I've always been into that. So, probably the first one that I started really paying attention to was the Clinton administration. Then I really got going with, Bush against Gore. And the whole the voting debacle with Florida. Certainly I was in it to win it with Obama. I grew up working class, and, if you grow up, I think, in that environment, and especially in a coastal area, me and my family, we always kind of leaned left. But let's just give a little bit of history. I mean, both parties have changed. I think that one of the what the hell was that? I think one of the factors in President Trump's victory was the development of the Tea Party. Now, that's been going on for years, and I think finally some of those ideas came to fruition. Now, I know there have been people from the Tea Party elected as government officials, but this was really I think born from some of their radical ideas, and getting away from keeping some of the principles of the right, but getting away from it. And, you know, the Clinton administration really kind of abandoned what the left used to be about, and that was big labor. So I think after Reagan and his fight against the unions and stuff like that, you know, the left redesigned themselves in some way to reflect almost, you know, exactly what Reagan had built. So, you know, the other thing is, and I think it's very obvious, is that Hillary had to rely on the popularity and the support of Obama. So she couldn't run on change, you know, and that usually is very effective if you're running on change, because you know, nothing, the problem is nothing really changes. So, you know, you elect somebody and you're hoping that they're gonna, you know, look out for you and be a leader. And when nothing really changes, then all of a sudden the person who says they're frustrated and they're gonna change it, usually gains popularity, and that's exactly what was going on. So, see, the problem is, and one thing I think that we need to start putting into perspective is the 2008 economic collapse, and what that did psychologically, morally, and also what it did just in reality to the workforce. You know, you had new companies come up, you have new tech companies come up, but for most people, you know, it was kind of a, well, if you don't want to work, then we'll get somebody else to do it. And, you know, what usually took two people to do, they wanted one person to do. You know, so they won. And, you know, it's one of the factors that I don't think we look at enough. You know, and then of course, well, how is that frustration guided? Well, it's guided with, oh, it's the immigrants, or oh, it's you know, white males, or I think both sides have people they're blaming. You know, because they do see, you know, people who are well off, and then they see a lot of people who are not, and they don't have opportunities, and they're wondering why. And I think that goes for both sides. I think Bernie was tapping into the same frustrations that Trump was, and they were just, their rhetoric was guiding people differently. But I think essentially it was the same, you know, frustration, and it was the same economic hopelessness that got people mobilized enough to want these two individuals as spokesmen for them. So what is the election of Donald Trump? What is 2016? Well, I think it was going on during the Obama administration, but Matt Taibbi wrote a book called Insane Clown President, and I think it goes over pretty well some of the factors. But again, there's a major leftist bias that I think gets in the way of really analyzing it in its totality. Because he's so disgusted with the fact that, you know, Trump is president, right? You know, again, I mean, you know, you elect a president. It's supposed to be the representation of the country, you know, and having kind of like a foul-mouthed person who doesn't seem to have that much education on, number one, history, and number two, foreign relationships and stuff like that. You know, Matt Taibbi is you know, kind of using Trump as, or he was using Trump, kind of like Hunter S. Thompson was using Nixon. I think Matt Taibbi's work has actually evolved very, very well since the publication of Insane Clown President, and I think he's really starting to get somewhere as far as analyzing what's really going on. So this is a part one of, you know, I want to go over this a bunch, and again, I thought that some of my ideas yesterday were a little bit more better presented than they are now, which is unfortunate, but you know, that's what happens when you don't record. But so anyway, in Okay, in in the Insane Clown President, it actually goes over the fact that Hillary was referencing an AI to try and pinpoint what the population was thinking. So, if you take something like, let's say, Google, for instance, because that's one of the most popular search engines. Now, what is Google? Well, Google represents, an information database for the most part, but it also represents the spontaneity of thought. So, whatever you are thinking at the time, you can search, and you can collect that data and see how many people are thinking the same thing, feeling the same thing, whatever. It's one of the reasons why. It's actually one of, I think, the main factors of the 2016 election, because Hillary, unfortunately, was not charismatic enough to take these ideas and make them entertaining. Whereas I think, and I know the Cambridge Analytica or Cambridge Analytics or whatever, I know that story broke. And as far as trying to spin the election through algorithms and data collection. And you can take a look at that. Cambridge Analytics, I think it's called, which is basically just swaying public opinion through designing stories from data collection and AI, as far as I understand it. So if you give Hillary, let's say, the idea that, or if she references the AI and it says people are becoming increasingly suspicious of mainstream media stories. Okay, let's say that. So you can tell through what the web searches are and the conversations that people are having that this is something that is becoming more and more prevalent within the population, this idea. So you give Hillary that information. Well, can she convey those ideas with charisma and basically through entertainment? Well, it didn't look like she could, where Donald Trump would get the same info from the data and be able to relate to the people because he knows what they're thinking, and he was able to do it charismatically and with a sense of how to manipulate the media enough to make these ideas entertaining. Not only that, but during the 2016 election, I mean, Trump almost looked like a conspiracy theorist, and the fact of the matter is a lot of people do watch conspiracy videos and believe in these conspiracies, and so there's no secret, I guess you could say, why he would even end up on a platform like Infowars. Well, I mean, what demographic is there? The demographic of people who are suspicious of the government and suspicious of what's going on, and tapping into that mindset. Now, the other thing you can do is, if people are becoming suspicious of mainstream media outlets and stories, well, if you know that, and you're, again, charismatic enough and entertaining enough to convey that and kind of make pretend or act like these are your views as well, well, then you have control of it inside the system. Because if you don't, then the population just doesn't believe the media, and you can't control it. So if you know that people are not responding to mainstream media outlets the way they used to, and then you can spearhead it by saying, oh, well, the media is public enemy number one, then you have a government agent who is now controlling that narrative, so you don't even really have to worry about it. Now, I'm not saying that's a conspiracy. I'm not saying... What I am saying is that now, you have a spokesperson who's the President of the United States saying that he doesn't trust the media, and then you mobilize his side of the aisle. And it comes across as genuine. It comes across as, the fact he's looking out for everybody. He's the only one telling the truth, blah, blah, blah. So, I honestly think that was one of the factors within the 2016 election. and that is being able to generate what appeared to be genuine from a bunch of data. So it was a performance that was that appeared genuine, that was based in a bunch of data, you know, and I think we're going to see that increasingly more and more. I mean, Justin Peele made a video where, you know, he basically spoke for Obama, so it was like Obama was speaking, and then he revealed kind of the man behind the curtain, which was him, basically putting words in Obama's mouth, and it looked like Obama. Now, of course, that was it was a clever joke, because number one, it's like, aha, isn't that funny? But number two, through that joke, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, like, we have the capability to do this. Like, we could put Putin's face up there and say whatever we wanted as far as oh yes, we meddled in the 2016, you know, presidential election, you know, and have the population believe that. So you know, I'm not saying that's what's going on with Trump right now, and I don't even want to get into that right now. Like, again, this is about trying to analyze and make sense of the 2016 election, where people are coming from and what's really going on. I mean, you know, again, I think looking back to the 2008 economic collapse, I think is very important, because it's created kind of a psychological arena that hasn't been really put into perspective yet. You know, it hasn't really been put into perspective. And, you know, as far as, like, you know, election meddling and what was going on with WikiLeaks, you know, with Hillary and stuff like that, well, look, I've lived through weapons of mass destruction. I've lived through, you know, Y2K. You know, I've lived through what was going on with the terror alerts after 9/11. You know, all of these things, no matter true or false, become this kind of sensational thing, where it's kind of entertainment. It's certainly theater, you know, for the most part. You know, we'll see what happens in 2020, because certainly, you know, the Russian meddling or whatever, those narratives are going to become increasingly more complicated, I think, and more important. What I think is going to happen in the second term, as far as bread and circus is concerned, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, something comes out with the taxes for Trump, or insider trading, or something. I wouldn't be surprised if season 2 of the Trump presidency is about a prolonged theater of impeachment. That's where I see it going. But all right, so that's my thoughts on the 2016 election, part 1, and hopefully you know, I can become even more, I don't know, articulate, but you know, really throw out there what I'm thinking and go from there. So thank you again.